Hi, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to the BA Zone's live pre-show. We're going to get started here in just about 5 minutes. I'm just making sure everything is up to snuff here. Just getting ready for today's live show. If the hat fits, survival tips for the BA, moonlighting as a PM. And let me just adjust a couple of settings. We're still playing with the lighting, trying to get it right. We have a brandy new camera set up here, and just seeing how this is all working well together. Okay. Hope everybody's having a great night, had a great day. Hopefully you're not too tired from shopping or baking cookies or cooking or all of the above in my case. Okay. Okay, we've got about 4 minutes before we start. So grab yourself a beverage, put on some comfy slippers, clear your mind, and relax. And I hope you caught last week's show, Hocus Pocus and the Magic of Focus Groups. And if you didn't catch it, or any of our other shows in our series titled 10 Techniques for Better Requirement Gathering and Elicitation, or you'd like to watch them again, because that's what I like to do, you can check us out on periscope.tv/the BA Zone, facebook.com/the BA Zone. You can go to YouTube and just search for the BA Zone, or you can go to our website, thebazone.com, and watch live. And please share this session or invite anyone you think would find this information helpful or interesting. So everything looks like it's working. I'm just going to check one more thing. It looks like we're good to go here. I don't know how many of you are celebrating Christmas, but if you have one of those elf on the shelves, that little sucker's been all over this house. And there's been some pretty interesting videos online if you haven't seen them for that little elf on the shelf. Sweet little thing. Sammy's the name of our elf. And he shows up sometimes in the most inopportune places. But we love him. And just 2 minutes to the countdown. BA's moonlighting as a PM. Some people deny they exist, but we know they exist. I'm sure there's a lot of you out there. Just swamped in work. Okay. Someone wants to give me a shout out just to make sure. If you can't hear me, just send me a little boost. Hopefully the sound's okay. Okay. And if you're just joining us, we're just about to get started with tonight's show. If the hat fits, survival tips for the BA, moonlighting as a PM. And we just have 1 minute to go. Get your papers and your pencils ready. Okay. Everything looks adjusted. Sorry, this is sort of behind the scenes stuff for me. We don't have our usual setup tonight. I'm working solo this evening. So we don't have all the magic in the background that we normally have. We normally say, pay no mind to that person behind the curtain that makes all the magic happen. That would be Kathleen. Okay. Looks like we're ready to go. Welcome everybody to the BA Zone's live stream of If the Hat Fits, survival tips for the BA moonlighting as a PM. Before we kick things off, let me introduce myself. I'm Marianne Marson, co-founder of the BA Zone. Kathleen is off tonight working on some of our technical projects, but we created the BA Zone to help everyone who creates and maintains business and technical requirements. So whatever your business analysis questions are, we can help you get to where you need to be. Okay, so let's get started this evening. You know, nobody ever really talks about business analysts. Business analysts, they want to put everyone in a category. But let's face it, depending on the size of the company that you work for, BAs wear many different hats. But tonight we're just going to focus on the project management hat. And it's pretty much, once you get this skill under your belt, it just makes you that much more marketable as a BA. But let's understand first what project managers do, sort of a definition. Project managers oversee and facilitate the planning and organizing and implementation of a project that, when the stars all aligned, is delivered on time and on budget. And again, contrary to popular belief, in a lot of companies, there really is no formal, or sometimes not even an informal, project management office. And this can be especially true in startup companies. So a lot of the planning, organizing, implementation of a project or ongoing enhancements often falls on the business analyst. So tonight I'm just going to give you some practical survival tips for those BAs that are moonlighting as project managers. And if you think you've never done project management before, you probably have, and you're probably doing it right now. If you've ever planned a holiday party, or if you're doing so right now, you've done some project management skills, albeit to a very small degree. Okay, it's just really an analogy. But let's say you're hosting the entire holiday dinner. So basically, what are you doing? You're planning and you're organizing what gifts to buy, what foods need to be prepared, who eats what. You've got carnivores, you've got vegetarians, you've got completely vegan, who has certain needs. Are there allergies? Are there gluten intolerant, lactose intolerant? That could be a tricky one. Who sits where? You know, you can't sit Uncle Fred next to Aunt Pearl, because when Uncle Fred eats, his false teeth clatter, and that drives Aunt Pearl crazy. So you've got to move Uncle Frank next to one of the grandkids who can't really wait to see some teeth fly. So, you know, you've got all those issues and all those personalities you're dealing with. Do you have enough equipment? Do you have enough plates, utensils, chairs, emergency supplies, like for the unexpected turn of events? You know, when the kids fall down the stairs or the adults fall down the stairs, you know, it wouldn't be a party at our house without an ice pack or some Band-Aids handy. Then there's the timing of the food. So it all comes out on time. Is it in the right order? Do you have the appetizers before the main course, you know, the desserts last? Is everything still hot or cold? So you need to prioritize all of these tasks, see if you can combine any, and maybe rethink some things and save some things for next year's dinner. At some point, you're going to realize that you can't do it all, although many of our mothers have. So you'll need to delegate some of those tasks. And you're probably doing this all on a budget. So you can see there's really a lot to consider, even just for a dinner or holiday party, if you want things to go seamless and have a successful event. So in the business world, the elements are different. The task list is much longer, and dealing with the work family, clients, and customers can be just as complicated, or even more so. Now, as a BA, you've probably done some self-management of your time. So all you want to do is, let's just expand that discipline and go over some of the survival tips that you're really going to need. We're not going to go through a full-blown project because there's a lot of financial things that go on. But let's just begin small by looking at a company with a long list of enhancements, requests for features or improvements. and no real plan to get them implemented. This can happen often if developers are creating on the fly. The company's moving very quickly. Everyone has a lot of requests. A lot of things get backlogged. And if they're doing a lot of, putting a lot of new stuff out there very quickly, you can wind up with a pretty big enhancement list, not to mention a fairly big bug list. So what do you want to do? The first thing you want to do is get organized. So prepare a list. You can use a centralized spreadsheet. That's fine. And I kind of liken this part to cleaning out your garage. If you've ever cleaned out your garage, this is sort of where in the springtime you take everything out of the garage, or you're cleaning out a basement or an attic. You kind of move everything out of the garage, and that would include all of your enhancements. And you may find these user requests in individual department spreadsheets. You could find a centralized spreadsheet if you're lucky somewhere. There could be a help desk that has these requests, a suggestion box, or some type of actual software application that's used to request and track enhancements. So that's some of the places that you want to gather all that information from. So that's sort of cleaning out the garage, getting all the items out there in the open so we can see exactly what you have. Then you want to take and group and categorize those requests. So if you're sticking with the garage metaphor, you want to take all the like items and put them together. You want to put all the tennis rackets and all the garden equipment together, and all of the snowblower stuff that you use come winter time, and put that all together so you can see exactly what you have. And you may have duplicates, and you may want to remove duplicates. So then you want to take all of these requests that you have, or these enhancements, and you want to sort of group them. So you may want to group them by, are these enhancements relative to a particular page? Is it a particular feature, a function, or a process? And try to put them, give a category, each line item for each enhancement, go through and put it through. If you have an admission process, if you're a hospital, and that's, something you may need an insurance card, that's part of admission. Just label it as admission. So you want to go through and try to define that and group things together. And we do that because a lot of items that you have out there, a lot of enhancements, if you have 200 enhancements, the first enhancement could be related to a particular page, and the 50th enhancement could be. And if it's not really been grouped really well, you want to group those things together and work on one page at a time. And it's actually better for IT. It is for development. It's better for QA, and it's less expensive if you're touching a page once. So once you do that for all your enhancements, now go through and see if you have an external customer enhancement list. This could come from your marketing department, your sales, or if you're actually doing work for particular customers. If you have a licensed product, you want to go through that. You want to list who that client is, keep track of that. And they may, if you're sharing functionality in a suite of products, for example, there may be some overlap. So you may be able to knock off one feature for your internal customers as well as your external customers. And once you get through with that list, then go on to your bug list and do the same exact thing for your bug list, for your internal bugs that are happening, and also the external bugs. And that's sort of getting everything in one place so that now you have something to work with. If you don't have that, that's a really important step to do, because the next step depends on that. The second tip, you want to create a team or a committee that will go over all of these enhancement requests on an ongoing basis. And typically it's your department leads. You identify, 5 or 8. You try to keep the group kind of small, no more than 10, because it sort of gets out of control. And if you have to have 2 separate group meetings, and do them separately. If you're working with a really large group of people, you can do that. But it becomes a free-for-all if you can't control that group and keep it fairly small. And in that group, you'll want to include a QA or quality assurance person, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. At this point, I don't recommend you include development. Development is busy developing, and you want to keep them developing. You will check in with them definitely before we get further down the road, but you don't want to waste their time at this point going through all of these enhancement requests. So, again, department leads, maybe 5 to 8, no more than 10. Include a QA representative, but again, that he'll be a little later or she'll be a little later in the process. And once you identify those department leads, you want to set up an ongoing monthly meeting and invite those team leads. Now, we say monthly, and we're hoping that if your release management process, what's going out into production, if those releases take place, monthly, you're going to have an ongoing monthly meeting. You can have them more often than that, but usually once you have the first 1 or 2 monthly meetings sort of suffice to get everything done that you need to. So that first meeting that you have is sort of considered the kickoff meeting. And you want to print copies of that enhancement list or spreadsheet that you've taken the time to put together, email it to remote people who might be participating, and get right down to working that. As always with everything, it's really important to set expectations. So explain the goal of the team, the process, and some basic rules. So for example, just explain to them what you're going to do. And basically what you're going to do in these meetings is you are going to go through these items and you're going to prioritize them. You're going to analyze them. You're going to create a plan, and they have to understand that plans will change, so they need to be flexible, especially when you're talking about enhancements and bug fixes. You're going to be assigning tasks, and plans are dependent on completing those tasks. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And you're also, as the BA, going to be following up on these tasks to make sure they're completed. And after each implementation, once we get down the road and they build something and they put it into production, you're also going to be conducting post-implementation meetings to review what went good, what went bad, kind of thing. And as a BA, you'll also explain to them that you will be providing ongoing weekly status communication as to where the enhancements are in the development life cycle, so that everybody's kept up to speed. And then you're going to repeat that process as needed. Some of the basic rules that would apply that you might want to go over is that no item will be included without development's approval. And what I mean by that is approval for it to be in the next release that's going out to production. Because they have to be the ones to say we can get it done or we can't get it done in that time frame. And no items will be included without requirements or a technical spec sign off by the team leads and everyone else that needs to be involved. And once finalized, no additional items will be added. Now everybody can laugh because we know there's always exceptions to that rule, but it really, you really have to deal with them on a one-off basis, because otherwise you're going to be dealing with a lot of scope creep. So, we try to say this is what's going in the release. Now, if development says, we've got time, we can throw a couple of extra freebies in, that's great. But make sure it doesn't affect anybody else down the line, such as QA, or if there's any training or anything that needs to happen in order to release that extra add-on. So then you get right down in the meeting to prioritizing each of the items. And you want to start with the internal enhancements. This can be a little painful. Sometimes it can be a little fun. And for each enhancement request that's been put out in front of you, you want to rate it as either a high priority, a medium, or a low priority. Now, the team leads are the ones who are going to be saying it's a high, a medium, or a low. You may find that you're going to have a lot of highs because, of course, if you have different departments involved, you know, everybody's stuff is more important than the next guy's stuff. But you really want to take a good look at it and have a discussion. You lead that discussion as the BA. High priority for us, and you can define it with the group ahead of time, but high priority typically means something that's necessary immediately or within the next release to grow the product, improve the process or the flow, for example. And if you're dealing with bugs, when we get to the bugs section, high priority is something that literally stops the user from being able to get their job done, or it impacts them so much that they can't get their job done. That could be broken links, page errors, problems saving, problem not being able to go to the next step in the flow, those type of things. They're considered high priority. And you want to handle all the high priorities first before you move on to the medium and then to the low, with some exceptions, and I'll explain that in a few minutes. A medium priority, that would be something you consider you still need it, but it can wait until the high priorities are done. Low priority, examples of that could be spelling errors, grammar, font changes, maybe some color scheme changes. Now, you know, low priority, a spelling error may not be a low priority in certain circumstances. So again, let the team leads decide, you know, if that's considered a low priority. If your whole entire job is content, spelling errors then could be, you know, a higher priority than something else. But it all just depends on, you know, the business that you're in. So once you get that done and you go through and you prioritize every single item, depending on how many items you have, this may take more than one meeting. You're going to move on to the customer enhancement list and do the exact same thing for that. Prioritize that. And again, you're going to be doing that with the clients or the customer, unless you have, you know, unless it's the community at large, then you may not go out to the John Q public and ask them. But we're talking about clients and customers you may have contracts with. You're going to go through and prioritize their list. And then go on again to the bug list, the internal and the external bugs. And this is where your QA representative is invaluable. They come in very handy. That, you know, don't waste their time up until this point. Have them join later in the meeting, again, because they're working on projects and doing a lot of quality assurance work there, and you don't want to stop that in any way. But they have a feel for the pulse of all the bugs that are coming in, and you may be getting multiple bugs for the same bug. So it's sort of repetitive, you know, and duplicates, and they know then that that's one that's out there and everyone is seeing. So they're really very good to have in the meeting when it comes to the bug list, going over that and prioritizing that. So that's where you want to include them. Once you go through and prioritize everything, the harder part actually is planning the next release. So when we're talking about release management, that's the process of managing, planning, scheduling, and controlling a software build through the different stages and environments. And that includes testing and, you know, deploying software releases, whether it's a release, a launch, an iteration increment, whatever term you want to use. And as you're planning for a release management, like I said, you know, we've done releases that were weekly, monthly, quarterly. So it just depends on your development team, how often they're doing these releases. But you want enough time to be able to fully test, you know, develop, fully test out. So as you have all of these high priority, medium priority, and low priority bugs, you want to start to analyze them and discuss which items must be in the next release that goes out into production. Again, depending on how big your list is, how big your development department is, I would just say a nice ballpark is to try to limit the number of releases or what you're analyzing to 10 items for each list. So 10 for your internal enhancement, 10 for your external, 10 for your internal bug, 10 for your external bug. So potentially 40 items. Now, given that you have limited resources and limited time to do all this, the goal would be to now scale those 40 items down to 20 that would actually go in the release. And again, we're talking about the high priority items. So things you need to consider. So we move on to the consideration elimination process. The first thing you want to look at in those high priority items is the quick wins, the low hanging fruit, the easy enhancements that make everyone happy. You can even select one or two from the ones that are prioritized as moderate or low priority and throw them in with a bunch of your high priorities. But these are these are the ones that are going to get you the best bang for your buck, makes people happy, sees that there's actual progress. A lot of times what happens is if you have a development team who is prioritizing the enhancements, they're looking at it, what may be good for the users, and the users are thinking, you know what? That new feature is terrific. It'll be great. But if you could just fix this one little enhancement, put this one little thing in that's killing everybody, you're going to have a far more successful launch, because people are like, you know, this thing's been over here for months and months and sometimes years, hopefully not, but it's been there a really long time. And yeah, it's great you're doing that, but I've been asking for this forever. So some of those quick wins, those are what they call low hanging fruit, getting those done can really put a lot of confidence, give people a lot of confidence about your ability to get that over the line. Another thing to consider is combining enhancements or bugs. So if you're, as I said before, if you're going to touch a page, consider just touching it just once. If there are multiple enhancements for that page and there's also bugs involved for that page, combine them. Combine them into one. It may require a little more development or QA time, but it is a better use of everyone's time. So, you know, touch it once, test it well, and you're good to go on that. So consider combining some enhancements. Also, you want to consider the timing. Can the enhancement actually be implemented from the operation side in time for the next release? Are they ready? A lot of times they are not ready. Many enhancements need additional decisions, designs, input, etc. We've had, you'll have requests for, I would like this automated logic to be put in throughout the system. And maybe it is logic that requires a scientist or a physician. It's not something that a BA could readily just come up with this logic. That requires that team of physicians or scientists to go out and create that logic and provide it back to us. So there are things that the BA is not going to be directly involved with. These are some of those delegated tasks that come up often in projects, and they require additional time. So a lot of times, a good way around this is that the operations is really not going to be ready. So you can't put it in that release until they provide you with that information. There also may be training involved. You know, if it's a fairly large feature that affects a lot of people, they may want to do some formal training. And if they cannot get that training done before that release, that pushes that item out to the next release or potentially the release after that. There may be forms that need to be designated, designed or printed. That takes time. There may be marketing or sales tasks that need to be completed. That takes time. And, is there a cost associated with putting this particular feature out or enhancement? And does it affect that individual department's budget? And so those are some of the things that from the operations side would literally not allow you to put that particular enhancement request into a given release, and it might have to be pushed out. Something also to consider when you're deciding what to put in the release is, are there other bigger projects going on, new products, completely new products or features, big projects, not just little enhancements or feature lists that may cut into development time and increase that effort. So that's why you really need to do the next step once you get some of these enhancements, a list of 20 enhancements. You need to go back and sit down with the developers and QA for their input. Can these items be developed and tested by the next release? Do they have enough resources to do that development and testing? Is it within their budget? If equipment or hardware has to be purchased, etc. And if they decide the item cannot get into the next release, as a BA, you have to have them give an estimate of a future date, have them provide a future date of when this particular item can go into a release, which release date. And that's really important because you need to sort of estimate how much time that they would need and then plan accordingly when you take it back to your team leads in your enhancement committee meeting to tell them, look, they can't do it by this date. They could do it by this date. So is there something else that we want to try to get in to the next release instead? So it's a back and forth, a give and take. And these are all dependencies that could potentially delay or eliminate an item from the next planned release. So eventually you're going to get down to finalizing the release items. Each release, it's a good idea that each release should include enhancements and bug fixes. I don't, in some companies, they're constantly putting bug fixes through. If it's something that's obviously a high priority bug, it's going to get done pretty quickly because it can't wait for a release. People can't work. It has to be done. But if there are other bug fixes, you might want to consider including those in as well. As I said, you try to go for the high priority items. If you have a lot of high priority items that are going to take a lot of time, then pick one or two high priority items and then go to your medium priority. And sometimes even your low, you can throw some of those in as well too. So what I've just outlined is really just a taste of what a qualified project manager would do. And I've done projects with and without project managers, and I can tell you they're very important to have. They're fantastic. As a BA, who is doing the business analyst job as well as the project management job, it can be pretty time consuming. But basically, when you're a BA doing this job, what you're trying to do is standardize the release management process from the perspective of the users and the team leads so that everyone is engaged, everyone is working together, getting what they want, everybody knows what will happen, when it will happen, and how much it will cost, and when they need to be engaged, etc. So it helps with buy-in of the next piece that's going out and the next piece that's going out. So for all of you business analysts moonlighting as project managers, make a plan and hang in there. And for all you successful project managers, reach back and give a BA in need a hand by sharing one of your favorite project management tips in the comments section here on Facebook. You can tweet or DM us on Twitter at the BA Zone, or you can go to our website, thebazone.com, and use our comment form. So that about wraps up our show for tonight, and we'll be back on Tuesday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Kathleen will be taking over next week because I have another engagement, but we hope you'll be able to join us then. And don't forget to like and subscribe in all the usual places, like us. And please remember to tag your friends, your family, your coworkers, your strangers on the train, that guy that's laying on your couch, anyone who will find this content helpful. And as always, we're here to help you own the zone, of business analysis. So thanks again for coming by, and see you next time on the BA Zone Live. Happy holidays, everyone. Santa, take us out. Take care, everyone.